which should be fun. I always get to watch Bill on this, but now I get to watch me. So again, for those of you that are looking at doing anything teaching, it's always really good to take some time to watch yourself teaching. Get to see some of those nervous habits that maybe I've forgotten that I have. But I want to thank you guys for being here this morning. I know the weather is not nice out, but hopefully y'all should get some clarity today on what Pascal theory is. And before we start diving into what Pascal theory is, I want to do a little review, because I think to help, Pascal theory can be a little bit complicated. And so I think if we can kind of look back at where we've been, it's going to help us see why Pascal is a little bit different and make sense of some of the pieces of it. So I've written up here on the board for you guys kind of where we've gone so far in class, right? So first thing, think back to the beginning of semester, we started with traits, right? And what's trait theory all about? Who the leader is, right? So all we focused on was who the leader is, okay? And we talked about some of those traits and trait theories. We talked about those kind of big five that consistently showed up in research. We talked about the big five, so y'all remember doing that assessment, emotional intelligence, all of that. Then we kind of dipped real quickly into skill theory, right? And what was the premise of skill theory? The leader's what? Abilities, right? So it was all about the leader's abilities. So we decided that just knowing the traits of a leader didn't help us know what effective leadership was. So we started to say, well, what can they actually do? What are they capable of doing? What are their abilities? We came up with those three skills, right? Technical, human, conceptual. And when we got done looking at that theory, we said, okay, this still doesn't explain everything, right? We can know who the leader is. We can know what they're capable of doing, but that still doesn't tell us what makes an effective leader. So then we said, well, we need to see about their behavior. And behavior theory is all about what the leader does, right? Okay. And so that's where we really started talking about, do they have task behavior? Do they have relationship behavior? Is this all ringing a bell? This should all make sense, right? And so if you can see, I've written all the things that have to do with traits, skills, behavior in purple, because that's all stuff that has to do with the leader, right? We completely were focused on the leader. And when we got done with behavior theory, what did we say? Still not enough, right? We still don't have enough information. We really still don't understand what it takes to be an effective leader, to have effective leadership. And so that's where, on Thursday, we talked about situational leadership, right? Situational leadership is part of this cohort of theories that we tend to call contingency theories. And contingency is just a big word for change. So that means that we understand that things can change. How you are as a leader, what you do as a leader can change depending on the situations that you're in. And so situational leadership is just one of the models that we look at. Leaders can change what they're doing depending on what's going on. And the big thing that we pointed out, we stuck with that whole idea of task and relationship, right? We looked at what leaders do, but then we added in, this is something new, so it's in red, we added in follower commitment and competence levels. And so what did we ultimately say on Thursday about situational leadership? It's on the board. What do we say? A leader changes their behavior to match what the follower needs. So if y'all remember going through those case studies that Dr. Weeks gave y'all, you identified what you felt like the level of the follower was. So you, based off of the scenario, you determined were they committed to the task or not? Do they seem to be competent at what the task is asking them to do, or are they not? And then based off of that level of the follower, you've determined what level or what behavior the leader needed to have to most effectively lead that follower. Remember? Is that ringing a bell? Okay. So contingency theories, what they're adding to this whole timeline is now we're adding in the follower, right? And so ultimately we're saying, okay, if we're looking at the follower, we're starting to look at a bigger picture, more of the situation, to determine effective leadership. And so path goal theory kind of is along these same lines. Path goal theory is saying, okay, we can look at more than just the leader to figure out what's going to be effective leadership. And what I want y'all to be doing, and the reason why I wrote this on the board, is as we go through path goal theory, I want y'all to be able to identify what things are similar to situational leadership, what things are different. Because like I said, there's a little bit more to path goal theory than there was to situational leadership, and I want to see if y'all can identify that. So here's the textbook definition of path goal theory. Path goal theory centers on how leaders motivate followers to accomplish their goals. Sounds good, doesn't it? You're like, okay, that's pretty simple. That sounds like a legit leadership definition. The big thing here you're going to see is it emphasizes the relationship between a leader's style, so we know styles, their behaviors, the characteristics of the followers, so it's doing the same thing situational leadership did. It's looking at leader behavior, it's looking at some of the follower characteristics, and now it's looking at the work setting. Is that something new? Yes. Did situational leadership look at the work setting? Nope. It looked at some things about the follower and then told the leader how they needed to behave. So do y'all see now where we're kind of building on situational leadership? Awesome. Okay, so perspective. Ultimately, the goal of path goal theory is that your job as a leader is to help the follower accomplish their goals. Maybe their goal is a task. Maybe their goal is a big goal that you have. But you're not having to worry so much about training or things like that. You're just wanting to help them accomplish whatever they want to do. Do y'all like the sound of that? How many of y'all would say, yeah, that's what a leader's job is? Does anyone disagree? Okay, we'll come back to that question, okay? The big thing that y'all need to know about path goal theory, this is probably one of the big differences I think that you need to make so you don't confuse it with situational leadership, is it's about the motivation of a follower. So any of y'all, any of your education classes or anything talked about motivation? Anyone learned about motivation? Maybe in your psychology classes?
Not yet.
Huh?
Not yet.
Not yet? Well, let's just think then, if you haven't learned textbook motivation, what is motivation? How would y'all describe that? How do we motivate ourselves or others?
The reason we do something?
It's the reason we do something. So usually we have some kind of internal drive that's causing us to do something. Maybe that's the motivation. How else do we motivate?
Being a friend or a confidant, somebody else who's maybe you need.
Yeah, so kind of those interpersonal relationships can help motivate. How many of y'all are motivated by awards? Like you want to win first place in something. Maybe in high school you competed in things and you wanted that trophy, you wanted that ribbon, you wanted that banner. Okay? I'm going to admit, I like to win. Great. Okay? When we look at motivation, we can usually boil it down that people are motivated by either intrinsic things or extrinsic things. Have y'all heard those terms before? What is something intrinsic?
Isn't that more like personal, like a sense of accomplishment in your own mind? Like
Yes.
You know you did it, but it doesn't need to be broadcast to everybody else.
Exactly. So internal. So think about that. Intrinsic, internal. Okay? What motivates you personally inside? It doesn't require anybody else getting involved. You have that motivation yourself. And so internal motivators may be you just want to accomplish something. You have that personal drive that you want. Maybe you want that sense of accomplishment. Maybe you want to earn respect of other people. All of those are intrinsic motivators. Extrinsic, if intrinsic's internal, what would extrinsic motivators be? External, right? So what would be some external motivators y'all could think of?
So they're
fueled by the banners, the awards. You want to be recognized. Maybe you want to earn more money, get a raise at your job, a promotion, all of that. So what Pascal theory is really saying is that as a leader, you're going to help someone accomplish their goals by being able to figure out what motivates them, internally or externally, an intrinsic motivator, an extrinsic motivator. And all of this boils down to is this thing called expectancy theory. And essentially this motivational theory says that if people, they're motivated if you think you can actually do something, if you're going to have a certain outcome that you expect, and that you're going to get that payoff. You're actually going to get what you expected to get at the end of it. So think about that. This happens every day. What is something, let's coming to class on a day that it's raining, okay? Are you capable of coming to class? Yeah, everyone's capable, so we've determined that. Now, because of coming to class, what do y'all expect to get in return? What's the outcome you're wanting to achieve? Knowledge. Going to hopefully do better on the next test. Okay, all right. Everyone's got a little bit different response there, right? What your outcome is going to be based on whether you want an intrinsic reward or an extrinsic reward, okay? So it's going to be a little bit different. But payoff. We don't know the answer to this question yet, but do y'all think that by doing what you're capable of doing, the outcome that you think you're going to get, do you think that's actually possible to get that? Are you able to do better in this class by coming to class? Yes. Yes. We know the answer to that, yes. Okay? So that's kind of how expectancy theory works, how this motivational principle works. And that's kind of what Pascal theory is going off of. And so we're looking as leaders, we're going to say if we can figure out the motivation of our followers and a little bit more about what's going on, we can help them accomplish their goal. Does that make sense? Okay. Do y'all feel like this is a little bit more than situational leadership was? Yeah. And we're going to look real quickly at some of the specifics. So this is a model of Pascal theory, right? So subordinates, your followers are over here on this side. You've got this path, so the things that followers need to do to reach their goal. And in life, we have obstacles, right? So Pascal theory says your job as a leader is to figure out, while your followers are along that path, how you can clear the obstacles. And all of that's based off of motivation. How can you motivate them? Is it that intrinsically they just need to have a better idea of what they're trying to accomplish. And as long as they can have that clear vision, that clear path ahead of them, they're good. For others, maybe those obstacles stop them dead in their tracks, right? And so extrinsic things get in the way. And maybe your job as a leader is to get those things, move them out of the way, all right? Or maybe you just need to provide support. So kind of like Kylan said, just that interpersonal relationship. If a follower has some support, then they're going to move around that obstacle and reach their goal. So what you're trying to do as a follower is figure out what's in the way of helping them reach their goal. Pretty easy, right? Except there's a lot of things that can be those obstacles per se. And so this kind of view of all the components, so imagine this motivation, this is that path down here. And what you're doing as a leader is you're looking at, okay, what do you know about your followers? What are those subordinate characteristics? What do you know about the situation at hand, so the tasks? And then based off of that, how are you going to behave now to help them be motivated? Okay? So if we come back over here, let's add on here, are we still looking at leader behavior? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to add leader behavior as a component of Pascal. Now, for situational leadership, all we were worried about were follower commitment and competence levels. We're not sure yet what we're looking at the followers in Pascal, but we know we're doing something with followers, right? Subordinate characteristics, so we've got follower characteristics. But what are we adding now in Pascal theory? The task characteristics, okay? So we're going to go through what these subordinate characteristics are, or follower characteristics, what these task characteristics are, and then kind of get an idea of, okay, once we know what these are, and once we're able to identify those things, how do we decide how to behave as a leader? So follower characteristics, and these are pretty simple. Y'all should have the PowerPoint slides, so you don't have to worry about writing a ton of this down. But when you're trying to decide in Pascal's theory how to lead a follower, two things. First off, you want to look at is, what is the follower's need for affiliation? That's a really fancy way to say what? To be a part of something. Is your follower a person that wants to be a part of a team? Or are they fine working by themselves? Do they need to feel connected with the group and what's going on? Or do they like to work more one-on-one? How many of you guys would say you probably have a strong need for affiliation? Raise your hand. I want to see. How many of y'all say you prefer to be alone? Okay. All right. That's something for your leader to know about you, okay? Preference for structure. All right. Does your follower, once you know how they want to be in the group, do they want to be a part of something? Do they want to be autonomous? You then wanted to figure out, what's their preference for structure? Do they like to be told exactly what to do? Or do they like ambiguity? Do they like being given a task and just able to accomplish it however they want to accomplish it? Is one better than the other? No. It's just their preference, right, for how they want to handle. So first two things we're figuring out about a follower is need for affiliation, their preference for structure, and then we're going to look at their desire for control. Okay, and what this simply means is, do they like to be in charge of their own work, or do they like for someone else to be in charge of their work? We use these terms called locus of control. All right, and think back to emotional intelligence when we talked about that. And we talked about that component of self-management. What did we say about self-management? What is self-management? Your ability to do what?
To look at yourself and be kind of critical of, how you do things, self-knowledge.
Yep, self-knowledge, your ability to look at yourself, but also your ability to manage how you react to things, to manage your emotions. And a lot of that has to do with your level of locus of control. And what we mean by that is, if someone has an internal locus of control, that usually means that they like to be in, I hate to use that word, like to be in charge, but they have a strong sense of personal responsibility. Okay, so if a task needs to get done, they feel a strong sense of responsibility for doing that. All right. If someone has an external locus of control, usually they see others are in control of what's going on to them, right? And so we say that they kind of feel like they can only react to what's going on around them. They're not in control of what's happening. And so usually followers who have this external locus of control want leaders who are a little bit more directive, right? You want someone to usually, I would say, if someone has an external locus of control, they probably also have a high sense of preferring structure, right? Okay, they prefer to just say, yep, someone else is responsible for this, not me. Okay, and then finally, you want to know, how much does the follower actually think they're able to contribute and accomplish this task? So what is their perception of their own ability? I think back to this, that sometimes, y'all have heard the phrase, perception is reality. But from the outside, we may not perceive the same things that others perceive, right? And so how many of y'all have, maybe you had a teacher in high school that told you could do something and you're like, no way. Right? Had that happen? You probably had a low perception of your own ability, but that teacher was able to see more ability in you. I think back to myself. So when I went in Florida, we had middle school ag. It was really big. And so when I got into 6th grade, I, of course, took my first ag class. I'd done 4-H growing up. But I was shy, so quiet. You could not have gotten me in front of people. no way. And I sat in the back of my ag class, and I'd do my work, and I'd turn it in. And it was the first year that middle school had been built. So our FFA chapter was just getting started. And my ag teacher walked up to me and said, "Hey, Lauren, we're putting together our first officer team. I would like for you to be our student advisor." I was like, I can't be an officer. No way, no how. That means I have to go to opening and closing ceremonies contest, which means I have to talk in front of people. I can't do that. No way. I had a very low perception of my own ability. But my ag teacher saw something different. And not to go into the whole story, but by the time I was a senior in high school, I placed in the top 4 at National Prepared Public Speaking. Holy moly. Like, if my ag teacher had not seen that ability in me, because of my perception, I may not have accomplished that. So it's important for you as a leader to know how your followers view themselves, because what you may have to do is help pull some of that ability out of them. Okay? And y'all can probably think of some of your own situations with that. So once you know about your follower, once you have figured out everything you need to know about your follower, this is where we're going to do something a little bit different in situational leadership. We're not going to jump right into, boom, here's what I need to do as a leader. We're now going to say, okay, let me better understand what we're actually trying to do. What is this goal that the follower is trying to accomplish? And so we're going to look at these components. We're going to look at how the task is actually designed, the authority system with it, and maybe the group of people that are working with that follower. Because do y'all think that a group influences what a person needs to do? Absolutely. So some things that you just want to look at, and again, these slides are online, so I don't want y'all to spend too much time hashing over these. But you want to determine, is this an unclear and ambiguous task? What do we mean by that? If you have a task or something that you're trying to do that's unclear and ambiguous, what would that be?
Say, like, we need to get something ready for this competition. You don't tell them what you need to get ready. Just
Right.
Stuff needs to be ready.
Right. Yeah. Hey, we've got this show coming up on Saturday, and I need you to make sure everyone's prepared. Prepared for what? Am I just do whatever you think is best? Okay. All right. Do you think you would tackle a situation like that a little bit different than maybe one that's highly repetitive? You've done this 1,000 times over. What's a repetitive task that y'all had to do before that if your boss or something was to tell you to do it, you'd be like, okay, got it, know exactly what to do? Huh? Okay. It's a repetitive task.
Go sweep the aisles in the barn.
Go sweep the aisles in the barn. Done. Dr. Weeks used the example of, hey, time to stretch after practice. Know exactly what to do, stretching after practice, okay? So you want to determine, is it ambiguous, unclear, or is it a pretty repetitive task you've done over and over again? Formal authority. What we're looking at there is how much involvement does the leader actually need to have in this task? If you're the leader, do you need to step in and actually help along with this? Or is your sole job just to motivate the followers? All right? Got to determine that. And then you've got to determine what is the cohesiveness of the group. So if there's more followers involved than just the one you're thinking of, you've got to see how that's going to impact the situation. You've got to look at the obstacles, some things that are getting in the way. What's going to stop this task from being accomplished? Okay? Can y'all think of a time you've had a goal and an obstacle's gotten in the way? Sometimes you're able to move past them, sometimes you're not. Okay? Got to think about those things that get in the way. I think about, when I was in my master's program, one of my goals is I wanted to become like a strengths finder coach. So, you take the strength finders assessment, you can actually be trained to be like the person who administers that and does like this cool consulting with it. And then I got online to do it, and it's like a couple $1,000. And I was a broke grad student. So that money was an obstacle that kept me from being able to accomplish my goals. So that's kind of the things you're wanting to look at. What obstacles can get in the way from someone wanting to do or achieve whatever goal they've set out to do. Okay? So we get into these 4 leader behaviors. So once you've looked at your follower characteristics, once you've looked at task characteristics, you can now determine what type of leader behavior you want to have. And there's 4 of them, and y'all are going to see some similarities here. So first, you can either choose to be a directive leader. Directive leader is someone who gives task instruction. All right? You want to know, you think that based off of what you know about the followers, based off of what you know about the task, they need to know exactly what needs to be done. So you've got to give a lot of direction. You need to give them a timeline. You need clear standards. Okay? Then you can choose to be supportive. You can be friendly and approachable, and you're really more concerned about the people you're working with, but you just want that supportive behavior. Okay? Then you have participative. So you consult with followers, you help them talk about ideas, but you still integrate some. So you've seen that based off of the task structure, you actually need to be a little bit involved in this task. So rather than just giving them support you're giving them support and ideas. Okay? But then this 4th one, this is going to be a new one. Because the other 3, do those sound pretty familiar to some of the things we talked about in situational leadership? Yes. What are some of those situational leader behaviors? Directing, coaching, supporting. Sounds a lot like these 3, right? But then we have this 4th one. So instead of being delegating, Pascal leadership says the 4th leadership behavior you can have is achievement-oriented. So now you're just wanting to challenge people to perform at their best. And so you're setting high standards of excellence. You're helping them seek continuous improvement. How is this different than delegating in situational leadership? If we went back to that quadrant of situational leadership, where was it on the scale of task and relationship? Low task, low relationship, right? So what are the implications of that, of being a low task, low relationship leader? You're assuming what about your followers? They know what they're doing. You don't need to be involved at all. Does achievement-oriented leadership sound like no involvement? No. It sounds like involvement, but it's like highly supportive involvement on steroids, right? You're challenging. You're helping them seek improvement. You're making them better followers. Okay, so I would say that's another big difference in Pascal theory. Not just that we're looking at task now, but we're also not just stepping back and saying, hey, we don't need leadership. We're looking at motivation. How do we make people better? Okay? So all of that to say, here's how Pascal theory works, all right? Essentially, once you know a follower's characteristics and you know the task characteristics, you can determine what the best leadership behavior is to use. And so all this table is saying is essentially if you decide that your followers are unsatisfied with what they're doing, they really like to feel a part of a group, they need to feel that big support from their leader. And what they're trying to accomplish is a pretty repetitive task, doesn't challenge them, pretty mundane, then as a leader, you need to be supportive to them. But on the other end of the spectrum, if your follower is pretty dogmatic and authoritarian, so that means they want a lot of structure, they want to be told what to do, they don't like ambiguity, but the task is ambiguous, so like opposite of what they want to do, but they've got to achieve it, and they don't have a lot of rules and there's a lot to accomplish, then you need to be a directive follower or a directive leader. So the only way you're going to be able to help them accomplish their goal is by being directive. Does this make sense? Oh. Okay. So that's essentially how Pascal theory works. And so if we go back again to this model, we're saying, okay, we've determined what we need to know about our subordinates. We figured out what we need to know about what they're accomplishing, so those task characteristics. And now we know how we need to be as a leader to help them get around these obstacles that they face. So building a little bit on this situational leadership theory, it's not same, but it's within that same context of being a contingency theory, because what we're saying is what you do depends on what? how you are as a leader in Pascal theory depends upon what? The task characteristics and the follower characteristics. So what I want y'all to do right now, individually, just kind of while you're sitting there, I want y'all to take a second. I want y'all to think about something from the past where you've been a leader. Okay? It could be a sports team. It could be a group at church. It could be an FFA group. It could be whatever. But something where you've been a part of a group and you've been the leader of it. Y'all thinking on it? And if you personally haven't been the leader of something, then think about a group that you've been a part of where someone else has been the leader. I just want y'all to think of a scenario in your head, okay? Now that you have that scenario, what was your group trying to accomplish? All right? What were y'all working towards? So all you need to be thinking about now is what group were you a part of? Were you the leader or was someone else the leader? And then what were your goals? Okay? Does everybody have those two things? Okay. We're going to break up into groups of 4. All right? And so what I want you guys to do is just the 4 around. So if you 4 will be a group right here, y'all can kind of move your desks towards each other. You 4 will be a group. If I can get 2 and 2, y'all will be a group. And then we're going to put you 5 together. Okay, so we'll have one group of 5. So move y'all's desks and kind of have them facing each other, and then I'll give you further instructions. And so you may have just like one person in your group as kind of like a note taker for right now. 2 and 2. Yeah. So if y'all want to get together. Okay. All right. Can hear my voice, clap once. Hear my voice, clap twice. Hear my voice, clap 3 times. It is kind of warm in here, isn't it, today? Yeah. All right. So what I want you guys to do is I want y'all in your groups to share each scenario that each of you came up with. So share with your group the time that the situation, the group that you came up with that you were a part of. Tell us what your role was. Were you the leader or were you one of you the followers? If you were a follower, tell us who the leader was. And then tell us what you were trying to work towards. After each of you have shared your scenario, I want y'all to pick one as a group. Okay? And we're going to use that for our next part of the activity. So kind of choose whoever scenario y'all like best. Okay? So take just a couple minutes to share your situations.
Very good. I was Untitled Chapter president at Grand Hill for 4 years. So I talked about that. Talked about how we wanted more member involvement because we had a lot of members in the AGLE, so they wanted to involve members in the AGLE. And then how we have a community and small health.
Got yours? Okay. Has everyone had an opportunity to share? No? Okay. Finish sharing, and in the next minute, choose the scenario your group's going to go with. So choose whoever's team y'all like the best and whatever goal you like the best, okay? So we'll make sure everyone in the group understands what the group is and what the goal is. Okay. Y'all got it back here? What are y'all going with? Okay, and what's your goal?
To get them to tell an educational.
Okay, so 4-H camp, educational event. Awesome. What do y'all have? Still deciding?
Yeah.
What are y'all going with? What are y'all going with?
You want me to tell you it?
Yeah, I want to know what y'all are decided as a group.
Our senior year, we had our FFA day, but we wanted it to make it special, make it the best that Jones ever had, and we went all out for it. And
so is it your officer team?
Yeah.
So FFA officer team, best banquet ever.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Y'all decide? Okay, kind of start deciding. Y'all know what are y'all doing going with? Okay, so you know the group or what have you, and you know your goal. Awesome. Okay, got it? Okay, all right, so here's your next set of instructions. Everybody listen. I'm going to give your group a worksheet. I only want y'all to be concerned with this front page that says Part 1. At the top, it has a little blank for group number. I want you to write your group number on it. This is Group 1. Oops, sorry, y'all. Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, Group 4. Okay? And all I want y'all to do is answer the questions on this first page. And so these questions have to do with identifying what's going on. Okay? So identifying the goal. You're going to tell us what the goal or project is that your team is working on. Identify what some of the task characteristics are. So I've put up here this chart again of path goal. I don't want y'all to worry about leader behavior right now. I just put this up here so y'all could see some of the terms that are used to identify tasks. But think back again, how do we identify tasks? We want to look at how much involvement does a leader need to have. Is it something repetitive or is it pretty unclear what needs to be done? Be able to identify in those terms the task. Then you're going to look at the characteristics of the followers. So of all the people involved in this, what are some thoughts about them? Do they want a lot of direction or do they want to work on their own? Do they like structure? Do they not? Do they expect you to be involved? Do they want to have support? Do they want that relationship? All those things. And if y'all need me to go back through some of those slides so you can remember some of the terms, I can do that. Y'all just holler at me and let me know. Then you're going to identify what the obstacles are. So based off of what happened in the situation, because one person in your group, this actually did occur to, what were some of the obstacles that were faced? And then finally, just tell us who the leader is. What I don't want y'all to do right now is don't focus on the outcome. I don't want to know what happened. I don't want to know if you accomplished your goal. I don't want to know if you didn't. We're just identifying the situation. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to give y'all in your groups about 10 minutes to do this, okay? And group 4. You're welcome. Okay. Since one of the first questions has to do with task, I've put that slide back up here to kind of look at some of the components you want to look at.
Myself and the other officers were tasked with getting more people to take time, getting more people to get involved, getting more people to do things. So I guess the goal of the project would be increased member involvement.
When the goal project, they were like new things they had never done before, and then you get goals. What they were like.
I feel like if somebody was like, go pick up that trash, and they'd be like, okay, I'll go pick up that trash. But like trash is kind of like the whole thing had been decorated, so we had to
Break it down. Okay, break it down.
and this is like you as the chairman of it, did you give a clear?
Don't think about what you did in the situation, just what it is. Yeah, don't think about what happened in the actual outcome. Just define the situation. So using some of these terms about task characteristics, what would y'all say this task was? Is it unclear, or was it a repetitive task?
Yeah. It was, yeah, very.
Okay.
What's above highly repetitive?
Unclear and ambiguous. So, meaning that you're not quite exactly sure what you're supposed to do to accomplish.
Oh, no. Wait, say that again?
So unclear and ambiguous means that you know what you need to do, like you know the goal you're trying to obtain, but you don't know what you need to actually do to get there. Like there's no clear instruction. So you feel like the bank was highly repetitive? Okay. Did it, as far as like involvement of the leader, so who's the leader in this situation? Okay. So the president. Okay. Does the president need to be super involved in this, or can they just like hands off and the rest of the team's going to take care of it?
The other officers, he kind of needed to give more sense of direction.
Okay. So that would be a characteristic. So you want to use these terms to identify the task. Okay. So just make sure y'all are kind of thinking through these 4 things. Is it clear or unclear? Repetitive, not repetitive. Strong authority, weak. Huh?
Supposed to go under one of these? This one
So
right here?
the tasks, these
that's
are
right
all
there.
characteristics of the task. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Does everybody good with tasks? Do y'all want me to put the follower characteristics back up? So remember, affiliation, preference of structure, their desire for control, and then their perception of their ability. Those are all follower characteristics. So what would you determine those to be for your goal, your situation?
I think more structure too, because if they had a strong need for affiliation, we wouldn't have to be kind of get involved. Okay, perfect.
Structure. What do you think the perception of ability is?
Where's that up?
So that was one of the slides. So that would be like a follower characteristic. Did the followers in the task, do they think they could do what needed to be done?
Perception of ability was already was automatically negative. Like
No.
connotation of like I can't do this, or was that just an example?
That was just an example used. Some people have really strong perceptions of their ability that maybe don't match. Yeah. Yeah. So perception ability can be positive or negative.
What if you have like a large group of people? Would you say both?
Think about to your situation, what would you say average was? Like, if you were, I'm assuming you were the leader of the group, do you feel like most people are like, yeah, I can do whatever's asked of me, or were there some people that are like, I'm here and I don't know what I'm doing, so just tell me. So
Like about
put that
half
down.
lost with hangovers, and the other half were.
So put that down. Half had strong, half had weak. That's something good for you to know as a leader, right? Okay. So follower characteristics.
Strong need for affiliation.
Yeah. So thinking about the officer team.
I guess out of the 2, it would be more towards strong need for affiliation.
Okay. In all honesty, did the officer team like for things to be structured?
Oh yeah, they want it pretty much all the way down.
Yeah.
Just to like fill in spots.
Tell them what to do.
Even at that point.
Okay. Okay. What would you say their perception of their ability is?
Low.
Low. So they didn't think that they could. They were like, we're expected to put on a banquet.
I knew their
And
abilities.
okay. So make sure you put down low perception of ability.
Capital letters?
What about their locus of control, internal or external?
Locus of
Were
control.
they responsible for putting on the banquet, or was it ultimately someone else's responsibility and they're just doing the task?
Yeah.
So you feel like there was internal?
Yeah.
So those are all characteristics you want to put down. Alright, let's see what y'all have.
We were talking about FFA chapter, and I was president.
Be a little bit more specific, so say increased member involvement for FFA.
Okay.
Like make sure you,
Okay.
and then like where you said who the leader was, like it's you, but were you the president? Were you, you know, let's be a little bit more specific there. Okay, let's see what y'all got. Okay, put, like make sure, like if someone else were reading this, that it's like creating an educational event, you know, and then youth direct, you know, just be as specific so that if someone else were reading it, that they would know. Is everyone pretty much finished filling out their worksheet? Okay. If everyone's finished, make sure your group number's on the top. What we're going to do is we're going to rotate these clockwise. So group 1. No, you don't need names on them. Just so with that, since we're going to rotate them, for questions 1 and question 5, make sure they're pretty specific so that when the other group reads it, they know who the leader is, they know what the goal is. All right, so just everyone take a second to review that. Make sure it's going to make sense to someone else. Okay? All right, now I want y'all to rotate. So group 1, give yours to group 2. Group 2, give y'all sheet to group 3. Group 3, group 4, and group 4 will come around and give yours to group 5, or group 1.
Thank you. My cousin made it. Really? What is this supposed to be? This is supposed to be fancy words.
So it'd be like who's the president and vice president. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and I'll walk y'all over to group 1 for you.
Oh, gee, thanks.
All right. So here's the next part of the activity. So you all now have someone else's leadership situation, right? You should be able to read part 1 for the group, and you should be able to have a clear idea of what it is they're trying to accomplish, who the followers are, the characteristics of those followers. You should be able to figure out what the task characteristics are, what the obstacles are. And what your group's going to do now is y'all are going to flip on the back of that sheet and you're going to see part 2. You're going to answer those 2 questions. So based off of what you know about that situation, how should you behave as a leader? So I'm going to go back to this slide. All right, the chart. This chart of how Pascal works. Now that you know follower characteristics, now that you know task characteristics, how does your group think a leader should respond in this situation? Y'all don't know the outcome. So I'm going to give a hint. Your group has group 4's situation, and theirs is to create the best FFA banquet they've ever had. You don't know if they actually accomplished it or not. And so because you don't know the outcome, y'all need to determine how should a leader behave for this situation to make sure that their goal is achieved. And you want to use the classifications of the follower and task characteristics to determine that. So once your group decides what the most appropriate leader behavior is, explain to me why. Okay? So take... Yep, so write your group number at the top so that I know it's your group that reviewed this one. Okay? So, do y'all have a question about your group? So, their goal was to create an educational event at a 4-H camp.
Okay.
So, do y'all understand what y'all's goal and everything is? Awesome.
The obstacles that were in the way of achieving these goals, the applications they had, and then
said based on the scenario information provided, and they said leaders need a appropriate leader behavior to effectively motivate followers to accomplish these goals. So they want strong structure. So we're supposed to answer based on the scenario information provided in part 1, what would be the most appropriate leader behavior to effectively motivate followers to accomplish their desired goals. So they talk about they need structure, rules, so that the students know what they're supposed to do. Educational background in case. Which one's preferred structure?
Preferred structure is going to be someone who's like dogmatic, authoritarian.
Yeah.
They prefer structure. That's going to tend to be a little bit more of what they want.
I don't know, since we're supposed to be like
Autonomous is the opposite of dogmatic and authoritarian. So autonomous by yourself. Okay.
rather than like they want maybe more direct that. Yeah. What would the task characteristics for build? Do you want ambiguous, neutral, specific?
Yep.
Sure.
So with
There's not a right or wrong answer. It's just, what do y'all think? Based off of what you know, what do you think would be best? Are y'all struggling because maybe some of yours are following into multiple?
yes, trying to decide between achievement oriented
Okay.
and directive.
Okay.
With how the leader is supposed to react, because I mean we look at it directive because we're telling the students this event and how they're supposed to go about it, but also achievement oriented because we're trying to have the students work together and figure it out kind of too, and the challenging and the complex, because obviously they're supposed to learn from it because it's educational. So I don't know, we're having a hard time picking between those two.
I feel like directive, like the leadership behavior fits directive, but the task characteristics fits the achievement.
So which one do y'all put more weight in though? So if you're the leader, because as you know, right now your group is the leader ultimately deciding how to behave in this situation. Are you as a leader going to put more weight on the task characteristics or more weight on the follower? Which to y'all is most important, and maybe that helps y'all decide which one to go with.
So
More the follower, my expectations, and you can tell.
Okay.
since it's educational, you want them to kind of
Excel,
Okay.
so it's basically we've already said
Okay, good. It's still recording. Okay. Y'all decided?
Yes.
I think we got it. We'll just put them up ourselves if we're gonna do that.
There are no wrong answers.
No, there's not.
Well, kind of fun.
Okay. If you need more time, say need it. Everybody good? All right. So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to go around, and your group is going to share with us off of the sheet that you have now what the goal is, what you're trying to accomplish, and what you feel like the best leader behavior is and why. So you're going to give us your response. And once you've done that, the group that actually created the situation I want you to then tell us whether you think their diagnoses as a leader behavior actually matched with what actually happened. So tell us if your group actually met the outcome, and just to give you all an example, maybe you decided that the most effective leader behavior for the situation would be directive, and you give us the reasons why. But the group that actually created the scenario says, we accomplished our goal, but now that I think about it, the leader behavior was actually supportive. We just want to see if we matched up. Does path goal theory actually help us choose the most effective? All right? So, with that, let's start with the group that has group 4's scenario. So,
they had to make an FFA banquet for their senior year. So we said that the best leadership style would be participative, so that the leaders were getting involved with their followers and making sure that they got the clarity that they needed, and that they got everything that they needed in order to succeed, so that the leader was actually alongside of them, working with them.
okay, did everybody hear that? Okay, so we are making the best FFA banquet ever, and based off of the follower and task characteristics, they determined that participative was the best. So they figured that people wanted to work by themselves a little bit, but there was a sense for control, and they needed a little bit of clarity in what they were doing, and that the task itself was a little unstructured. So participative. Group 4. Looking back, whose scenario was it? Colston's. So, Colston, tell us about this leadership scenario of yours. Did y'all actually accomplish it, and what would you say the leadership behavior actually was?
Not about. No, we of course accomplished it, brought tears to people's eyes. That's the same old story, but what do you want me to?
So, looking back, what would you say the leadership behavior was in this scenario? Because you were the leader, right? Were you co-leader? So what type of leadership behavior did y'all use?
I'm going to have to go with directive.
Okay. Do you think that was effective in the situation, or do you think participative would have been more effective?
In a sense, there were points where they needed more clarity on what they needed to do.
Mm-hmm. You probably could have given them a little bit of slack and a little bit more responsibility. Yeah. Okay, awesome. All right. Share with us group 1's situation.
Okay. So group 1 was tasked with creating an educational event for 4-H camp for a group of 8-year-old students. Task characteristics for the AGLE project, they said, were ambiguous, they needed rules, and supportive. Some of the characteristics of the followers were autocratic, they needed structure because they were young high school students. Some of the obstacles that they listed that were in the way of achieving their goals or completing the project were time and the behavior of the students. And they said the leader for the AGLE project was the youth director at the 4-H camp. So, as a group, we decided that based on the scenario, the best leadership behavior we felt would have been achievement oriented. And the reason for that was because we felt like with that, you would be a little bit supportive and a little bit kind of wanting the students to work on this event themselves, because they were supposed to gain from it and learn, because it was an educational event. And through that, we hoped that they learned something and worked with their peers, and they benefited from the activity.
Awesome. So achievement-oriented is what they decided that the 4-H camp leader should use to create this educational event. Whose scenario was it? What actually happened?
Yeah, I would say that would be the best one, with a little bit of supportive. They were just they were a good group of kids, but they weren't necessarily, we had tried something very new, normally before, the events every year were the same, and we brought new topics in, so they had to learn all about the subject matter themselves in order to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had high expectations for them, and it wasn't just here teach kids how to build a birdhouse. It was more hands-on, and so it was definitely like achievement, expecting the most out of them, and so I think they did a good job.
Awesome. So you do feel like the leadership in this situation was achievement oriented. Well, cool. Y'all found a match. Awesome. Let's go to this group over here. Tell us about number 3. You're ready. A little bit of change up.
We had group 3, and
Okay.
the goal of their project was to clean up after a church auction. Their task characteristics were unclear, ambiguous, and highly repetitive. And the characteristics of the followers were they needed affiliation, preferred structure, and half of them knew what they were doing, and the other half did not. So we chose directive as the type of leadership because the task characteristics were ambiguous. I guess you could do a little bit of supportive because they also needed some affiliation, but we thought directive was the best route to go.
Awesome. And this was your situation, right? Yeah. What was the outcome and what was the actual leadership behavior used?
It started out directive, like I had, my lists of what all needed to be accomplished, and it turned out there were just so many people with so much stuff to do that everybody kind of broke off into little groups, and the half that didn't know what was going on just kind of followed other people around, and eventually it all got done.
Awesome. But you feel like directive was the leadership behavior you used?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So we've got another match here. Very good. Share with us group 2.
So group 2, their task was to increase member involvement in their FA chapter. The task characteristics were that they were highly repetitive. Their followers' characteristics were they preferred structure. Some obstacles were that these followers maybe had other obligations, age was a problem, and maybe some financial issues there. And we decided that supportive was the best way to go about increasing that member involvement. The followers had a need for both structure and support, so we figured since the goal was defined as repetitive, that through the behavior of supportive, like being there and hands-on with your followers, that it was probably accomplished through to increase that member involvement.
Awesome. So whose scenario was this? All right. And what was the outcome? And would you say that's the leader behavior you used?
I would like to think the outcome was good. I don't know. You all know how it goes in a small town. You have the same people doing sports, doing FFA, doing everything else. And so I'd like to think that we had the maximum and what we could accomplish. But I think they did a great job in choosing that leadership style, and I think it was really good because we did have a lot of students involved in the FFA chapter, and that was kind of the goal of the officer team.
So you feel like as officers, y'all were more nurturing, so more of that supportive. Awesome. So we had 3 groups that they identified what behavior was actually used in the situation, but then we had one group that identified something different, and y'all could kind of see the pros and cons of each. Did this activity help y'all see how Pascal works? What are some things y'all like about it?
It changes based on your task that you're doing or your followers. It's very fluid.
Very fluid. It takes a little bit more into account. What do y'all not like about it?
A lot of things like Amber was saying earlier, she had a bigger group, so a lot of the stuff applied both ways, whether we had a group that knew what they were doing or didn't know what they were doing. So I feel like in a sense of just trying to narrow it down to certain characteristics of the followers or of the task, clarity and things like that, that's kind of difficult when it comes to bigger numbers.
Yeah, so the Pascal theory is still looking at leadership on like a one-to-one relationship. So you're a leader and you have a follower. How do you help motivate them to accomplish your goal? But what if you're the leader of multiple followers all trying to do the same task and they all need to be led differently? We're kind of running into that same situation that we had with situational leadership, right? Do we treat people differently? Do you not? What is y'all's opinion on that? Have y'all thought more about that since Thursday?
You need to change your leadership style for the followers, if the followers that you're interacting with. You can start out in a way that appeals to the most undirected followers, but leave it open, at the other end for people that want to do their own thing. Yeah. So if they need direction, they've got it. but if they are able to work independently, they've got that choice too.
So you think it's good as a leader to be individualized with everyone, and that you should be, if you can. Is there anyone that says, that sounds good, but really I think it's best that we're a consistent leader with a group, and it's more at the group level? Does anyone feel that way?
I think it really depends on the situation.
Okay, why so?
I mean, because, like she was saying, it's good to be individualized because then you're helping the individual people. But it's also like, for example, the group here and you're, as the teacher, I mean, you have a different way of going about it, but as long as you get it there, and then if people need more direction or my little self asking you to come look at my things and and ask for help, so I think it's also about like if they need more direction or if they're kind of like, I like doing it like this, what do you think? And they can kind of individual themselves too, maybe.
As your group was deciding what leader behavior was most appropriate, how many of y'all had maybe the situation happen where the follower characteristics seemed to be in one type of behavior, but the task characteristics were in another? Did that happen at all?
Yes.
So how did y'all decide which one to go with?
We just kind of decided what we thought would work better. What would we do?
Okay, what would work better? What would be new? Did y'all kind of have a conversation of, well, for this situation, I think the task characteristics are more important and we need to really do what's best for that? Or we think the follower characteristics are more important, so we need to do what's better for that. Did y'all find yourselves kind of making that decision? Is that what Pascal theory says to do, or?
How do you determine which one is more important?
How do you determine which one is more important? So that's kind of one of these criticisms of Pascal theory, is like, at the surface, this sounds really good. We want to consider more things before we decide what effective leadership is. But not everything in life is going to be equal, right? Or there's going to be clear cut. And so we're still kind of having to decide which is more important and determining our behavior off of that. Would y'all agree with that? Disagree with that? Okay. So that's not saying Pascal theory is bad. That's just kind of one of their criticisms. It's just like in practical application and use of it in every day, it's not as clear cut, for as complicated as it is, and all the complexity and all the things you're considering. You think you're going to get like a straightforward, this is exactly what to do, but you still are kind of having to make some assumptions and some preferences and decide what you think is best to do. And that's where, even though we had between two groups the difference in what type of leadership behavior is used, one's not right and one's not wrong. It's what was used. The big thing to do, though, is if you like Pascal theory and you think, okay, this is something like, hey, when I'm in a leadership position later on, I may kind of think through these things to decide how I want to lead. That's good, but after your goal is attained, after the followers' goals are attained, you always want to take that time to reflect back to say, okay, I chose this as the most effective behavior. Was it actually, or could I have done things a little bit different? So the big takeaway I want y'all to have with Pascal theory, all right, is we have 4 leader behaviors. You want to know what those are. You want to know, especially that, what's the one that's different than situational? Achievement. Okay, know those. Follower characteristics, the things that you need to consider about your follower. But then you want to know that Pascal theory adds in this idea of what's the task. And ultimately, you're trying to figure out what motivates a follower. Because really, at the end of the day, Pascal theory is a lot to remember. And we get that. Okay? You probably don't need to know every specific follower characteristic, every specific task characteristic. What we need you to know is that as a leader, your job is to motivate followers to help them achieve their goals, to get over these obstacles. And that motivation is, do you give them an intrinsic motivation? Do you give them an extrinsic motivation? And you determine that based off of the follower and task characteristics. So when you know those things, you know the best way to help them, the best way to motivate them to achieve their goal. Does that make sense? Do y'all have any questions about Pascal? Okay. if y'all didn't do it before class today, I would really encourage y'all to go back and read the chapter because it has some good stuff in it. And it has some good case studies at the end that I think y'all would find really helpful to help it make more sense. Like one of the case studies specifically shows 3 different types of leader behaviors and what the outcome ends up being, and kind of helps you go through that discussion of why was that effective or not effective, why did it motivate their followers, and why did it not. So that's Pascal theory. We'll see you guys Thursday. Yeah, if you'll give them to me.